Michelle Nyce was the picture of suburban perfection. Dr. Russell Nyce, her devoted husband, seemed incapable of violence. Marcus Bell, her secret lover, claimed he only wanted to protect her. Damian Cole, her long-lost son, had just come into her life after decades apart. But when Michelle's body was found dumped in the woods behind a quiet Ridley Falls trail, each of them became a suspect, and the carefully built image of the Nyce family began to unravel. What seemed like a random killing soon revealed a chilling chain of lies, betrayal, and obsession. In this twisted case, everyone had something to hide, and someone was willing to kill to keep it buried. Ridley Falls was the kind of town that seemed untouched by time. Nestled between gentle hills and thick patches of woodland, it was the sort of place where people waved to each other from across the street, where kids played on front lawns until the sun went down, and where crime was almost unheard of. The houses stood neat and proud along quiet lanes, their gardens manicured, their mailboxes never overflowing. It was the last place anyone would expect to become the center of a chilling murder investigation. On the morning of June 12, 2016, a local man named Jeremy Sloan was jogging along a familiar trail behind Hollow Pine Road, a path he had run hundreds of times before. The sun had just risen, casting a soft golden hue over the dew-covered trees. Birds chirped in the distance, and the air was cool and still. As Jeremy rounded a bend, something odd caught his eye, what looked like a bundle of fabric lying just off the path, half hidden beneath the underbrush. At first, he thought it was a pile of discarded clothes or maybe trash, but as he drew closer the shape became unmistakable. It was a woman's body lying face up, her arms at strange angles, her eyes wide open. He stumbled back, his breath caught in his throat. The sight was horrifying. The woman had bruising around her neck and visible cuts on her arms. Her shoes were missing and her clothes were disheveled. There were drag marks in the dirt nearby, suggesting she had been moved. Jeremy immediately called 911, his voice shaking as he tried to explain what he had found. Within minutes, police and emergency personnel arrived, sealing off the area and beginning what would become one of Ridley Falls' most complex investigations. The woman was soon identified as Michelle Nyce, age 42, a resident of Ridley Falls and wife of Dr. Russell Nyce, a local physician known and respected in the community. Michelle was a familiar face in town, always present at school fundraisers, charity events, and weekend farmers markets. She had 2 teenage children and lived in one of the largest houses in town, a beautiful colonial-style home with white shutters and a wraparound porch. To those who knew her, Michelle's life had seemed picture-perfect. News of her murder spread fast. Residents stood in small groups outside shops, murmuring in disbelief. Michelle wasn't the kind of person anyone expected to end up dead in the woods. Police began canvassing the area, questioning neighbors, reviewing camera footage, and checking cell phone records. Nothing about the scene pointed to a random attack. There were no signs of sexual assault. Her valuables were gone, but it felt more staged than convincing. Investigators believed this was personal. Russell Nyce told detectives that Michelle had gone out the night before around 9 to take a walk. She had been upset, he claimed, but he thought she just needed space. When she didn't return after an hour, he assumed she was cooling off at a friend's house or driving around. He said he fell asleep waiting and woke up to find her still missing. At first, the story sounded plausible, but the inconsistencies began to surface. Security footage from a neighbor's home showed no sign of Michelle leaving on foot. Her phone had stopped pinging around 9:45 p.m., with its last known location just minutes from where her body was found. Something wasn't adding up. As detectives dug deeper, they started to realize that behind the glossy smiles and the carefully curated public image, the Nyce family had secrets. Michelle's death wasn't just a tragedy. It was a doorway into a darker truth hiding in plain sight. And as the investigation continued, Ridley Falls would learn that no town, no matter how peaceful, is ever truly safe from the horrors people carry within themselves. From the outside, the Nyce family embodied the American dream. Their 2-story home sat proudly on Crestline Drive, with white shutters, blooming rose bushes, and a cleanly swept driveway where 2 luxury cars were always parked side by side. Inside the house, family portraits lined the walls, beaming smiles captured at graduations, vacations, and birthday parties. But beyond those carefully arranged moments lay a far more complicated reality. As police dug into Michelle Nyce's personal life, it became clear that appearances had been hiding a quiet storm. Friends and neighbors described Michelle as kind but guarded. Over the past year, they had noticed subtle changes. She had lost weight, often looked tired, and stopped attending community events. While most chalked it up to stress or personal matters, no one imagined the depth of what she was going through. Detectives obtained access to Michelle's phone and discovered a string of unusual calls and messages. She had contacted a divorce lawyer just 2 weeks before her death. A draft email, never sent, detailed a list of things she wanted to say to her husband. things about betrayal, manipulation, and feeling trapped. The contents painted a different picture of her marriage, one marked by growing distrust and emotional distance. It was also revealed that Michelle had increased her life insurance policy 6 months earlier, naming Russell as the sole beneficiary. That timing now seemed far from coincidental. Dr. Russell Nyce, when interviewed again, remained composed but defensive. He denied any serious marital issues and claimed he had no idea Michelle had considered leaving him. However, his calm exterior began to show cracks as more evidence surfaced. Financial records showed frequent payments to a private investigator under his name, suggesting he had already been suspicious of Michelle. When questioned, Russell admitted he had hired someone to follow her months earlier, but claimed it was only because he believed she might be having a mental health crisis. He said he was trying to protect her. The explanation felt hollow. There was more. Michelle had been transferring money into a hidden account, one that Russell didn't have access to. The transfers weren't large, but they were consistent. Investigators believed she was preparing to leave, quietly saving money to build a new life, possibly with someone else. That suspicion gained weight when a contact labeled simply as M appeared repeatedly in her call history. The messages were flirtatious and emotional, and the conversations were long. Detectives traced the number and found it belonged to a man named Marcus Bell, a younger man with a past that would soon take center stage. While police continued their investigation, the community watched in stunned silence. The woman they thought they knew, the doctor they admired, the family they envied. None of it was real. The facade had been maintained for years, but now it was collapsing. Michelle's murder had peeled back the layers, exposing something raw and disturbing underneath. A woman who had once seemed so in control was, in reality, caught between fear and desperation. The more detectives uncovered, the more it seemed her death wasn't just a tragic event. It was the violent result of a carefully hidden life unraveling. Tensions in town grew. Rumors swirled in grocery stores and on sidewalks. People whispered about Russell in hushed voices, watched his every move, and speculated about what really happened that night. But the truth was far more tangled than most imagined. Michelle's death wasn't just about infidelity or a broken marriage. It was about secrets she had kept not just from her husband, but from nearly everyone she knew. And one of those secrets was about to change the entire course of the investigation. The identity of M became the key to unraveling Michelle Nyce's tangled web of secrets. As investigators traced the phone records, they discovered the number belonged to Marcus Bell, a 29-year-old personal trainer who worked at an upscale fitness center on the edge of town. Known for his charming demeanor and fit physique, Marcus had many clients. Michelle Nyce had been one of them. Their professional relationship had evolved into something more, and their affair had been going on for nearly a year in complete secrecy. Marcus was quickly brought in for questioning. He appeared nervous but cooperative, admitting to the relationship almost immediately. According to him, their connection had grown stronger over time, and Michelle often confided in him about the unhappiness in her marriage. She felt ignored by her husband, undervalued, and emotionally isolated. He claimed Michelle had talked about starting a new life, one free from the restrictions of her carefully maintained image. She even spoke about the possibility of moving away, taking her children, and leaving Russell for good. But Marcus insisted he had nothing to do with her death. He said their last meeting had been a week before she was killed, and that she'd seemed distant, almost like she was preparing to end things between them. He had been hurt but accepted her decision. Investigators weren't convinced. His phone records placed him near Michelle's neighborhood the night of the murder. When asked, Marcus claimed it was a coincidence. He had been visiting a friend who lived nearby. That friend later denied ever seeing Marcus that night. As detectives pushed deeper, they discovered a pattern. Marcus had been involved in at least 2 other relationships with older, married women, both of which had ended badly. One woman had filed a restraining order against him, citing threats and obsessive behavior. Another had abruptly moved out of state. While none of these incidents proved guilt, they painted a picture of someone with a history of unstable romantic entanglements. The story took a darker turn when evidence from Michelle's computer revealed a folder of saved documents and notes, including screenshots of text messages from Marcus that were far more aggressive than he had admitted. Some messages hinted at jealousy, others at resentment. One in particular stood out. "If I can't have you, no one will." Investigators began to see a man who had grown possessive, even dangerous. Still, despite the suspicious circumstances, Marcus's DNA wasn't found at the crime scene. There were no clear fingerprints, no surveillance placing him at the site, and no eyewitnesses. Without concrete evidence, detectives were forced to keep him as a person of interest but couldn't yet make an arrest. Then, the investigation shifted unexpectedly. In reviewing Michelle's recent online activity, Detectives found search results that had nothing to do with affairs or divorce. She had been researching adoption agencies, looking up birth records, and making private calls to organizations in another state. When they followed the trail, they discovered something Michelle had never told her husband, children, or closest friends. Before marrying Russell, long before her picture, Perfect Life in Ridley Falls, Michelle had given birth to a child at the age of 17. The baby had been put up for adoption, a closed case sealed and forgotten until now. Investigators learned that Michelle had recently tracked down her son, now a 25-year-old man named Damian Cole. The possibility of this reunion added a new layer of complexity to the case. Why had she kept it a secret? What did Damian know? Could he be connected to her death? The focus of the investigation widened once more, no longer centered just on a love affair gone wrong. Michelle hadn't just been hiding a lover, she had been hiding a son. And whatever happened between them in those final days might have played a far greater role in her fate than anyone had expected. Damian Cole had grown up far from the quiet streets and clean lawns of Ridley Falls. His early life had been marked by instability, bounced from one foster home to another. He had spent most of his childhood searching for a sense of belonging that never came. He'd never known his birth parents and was told almost nothing about them. What he did know was fragmented, filtered through records and whispered rumors between caseworkers. He had been adopted briefly as a toddler, but the placement failed and he re-entered the system before age 5. From there, it was a blur of temporary shelters, institutions, and group homes. By the time he turned 18, Damian was on his own with no family, no guidance, and a long list of minor criminal offenses. So when Michelle Nyce contacted him out of the blue, it was a shock. She had found him through an adoption intermediary and reached out cautiously, unsure how he would respond. Damian was skeptical at first, thinking it might be a scam or a cruel joke. But after verifying details only someone from his file would know, he agreed to meet her. Their first meeting took place in a park 2 towns over. Michelle had driven there alone, wearing sunglasses and a scarf in an effort to avoid recognition. Witnesses would later describe her as visibly emotional, even tearful, while Damian remained distant and reserved. Over the course of 2 weeks, they met twice more, always in public, always quietly. According to Damian, Michelle had told him she regretted giving him up, that she had thought about him every year on his birthday. She wanted to make things right, even if it was late. He had listened but remained guarded. Trust didn't come easily to him. When questioned by detectives, Damian admitted that Michelle was supposed to meet him again on the night of her death. She had planned to tell her husband about him and believed it was finally time to bring the truth to light. Damian said he waited for her at a nearby gas station just off the highway, but she never showed. He left after an hour and returned to his apartment. There were no cameras to verify his alibi, however. His phone GPS placed him near the woods where Michelle's body was found around 10:30 p.m., an hour after she had last been seen. Pressed about this inconsistency, Damian claimed he had gotten lost trying to find a shortcut home, but his explanation was weak. Investigators grew increasingly suspicious, especially after they found fingerprints matching his on the exterior door handle of Michelle's car. He insisted she had once let him sit in the car during one of their meetings. Still, the connection was difficult to ignore. Further complicating things, a search of Damian's apartment turned up a pair of women's shoes that closely resembled the ones Michelle had been wearing the night she died. He said he didn't know how they got there. There were no blood traces, no fibers, but the timing and placement raised red flags. Damian had a volatile history, charges for assault, vandalism, and threats, but nothing that suggested murder. Still, detectives had to consider whether resentment or feelings of abandonment had boiled over into something fatal. While they investigated Damian's possible involvement, another piece of the puzzle quietly slid into place. A neighbor's home security system, one that had previously gone unchecked due to a system update failure, finally yielded footage from the night of Michelle's death. The camera captured the Nyce family's driveway around 9:15 p.m. Michelle was seen getting into her car and leaving. Minutes later, Russell's car appeared on the footage, following in the same direction. This directly contradicted Russell's original statement that he had stayed home that night. Now there were 2 men with motive, opportunity, and inconsistent stories. Damian, the son, left behind, and Russell, the husband, left out. Each man had a reason to want control. Each man had secrets they hoped would never come to light. But one of them had crossed a line that couldn't be undone. The truth, it seemed, was hidden between a broken past and a carefully crafted lie, waiting to be exposed by the final piece of evidence no one had expected. With 2 primary suspects and no solid proof tying either directly to the murder, the case stood on shaky ground. Detectives had unraveled a web of lies, deceit, and long-held secrets, but they still lacked the definitive evidence needed to make an arrest. The investigation into Michelle Nyce's death was nearing a standstill, and the pressure to find her killer weighed heavily on the team. It wasn't until a forensics technician revisited one overlooked piece of evidence that the case began to shift. During the autopsy, a single strand of hair had been found clenched in Michelle's right hand. It had been preserved and catalogued, but initially provided no match in the system. The technician ran it again through an updated DNA database, and this time there was a hit. The hair belonged to Marcus Bell. The revelation exploded through the case files like a bomb. Marcus had denied seeing Michelle the week of her death, yet here was physical proof that she had not only seen him, but had physically engaged with him, likely in a struggle. Investigators re-examined their timeline and began piecing together the day with a new perspective. Michelle had told Marcus their relationship was over. She had finally decided to come clean to Russell, reconnect with Damien, and start over. The affair, once a secret escape, had become something she saw as a mistake. She had made up her mind to let go of that chapter for good. What she didn't realize was how deeply Marcus had grown attached. What had begun as an affair had turned into an obsession. The confrontation happened the night she died. Michelle had left the house intending to meet Damien and possibly disclose her plans to Russell afterward. Instead, Marcus intercepted her. He had been watching her movements for days and knew her patterns well. When she parked near the wooded trail, he was already there, waiting. Surveillance footage from a business nearby showed his car idling along a back road less than half a mile from the woods at 9:20 p.m. According to his later confession, the confrontation escalated quickly. Michelle was calm but firm. She told Marcus there was no future between them, that she was going to rebuild her family and finally bring her son into her life. Marcus refused to believe her. He accused her of lying, of using him. The situation spiraled. In a moment of rage, he grabbed her. Michelle fought back, scratching at him, pulling out a handful of hair. He overpowered her, placing both hands around her throat until she stopped struggling. After she was dead, Marcus panicked. He dragged her body off the trail and into the brush, removed her shoes to make it appear like a robbery, and threw her wallet into the nearby creek. He then drove home, disposed of his clothes, and waited for the storm to come. When arrested, Marcus initially tried to maintain his innocence, but the evidence was too strong. The DNA matched the surveillance footage, and the scratches on his arms, hidden under long sleeves during every interview, left no room for doubt. Faced with the weight of it all, he confessed in full. The town of Ridley Falls was left stunned by the final outcome. Many had believed Russell would be the one arrested, or that Damien's troubled past would ultimately link him to the murder. But it was the quiet, smiling trainer, the outsider, who had harbored the darkest intentions. Michelle's death was not the result of a single secret, but of a chain reaction set off by the unraveling of many. Michelle Nyce had tried to take control of her life, to bring closure to her past and truth to her present. In doing so, she exposed the fault lines beneath the life she had built. Her murder became a chilling reminder that the most dangerous people aren't always the ones who look threatening. Sometimes, they're the ones who smile, listen, and wait for the perfect moment to strike.